Our story begins with our young protagonist, who is being chased by a group of guards. They call her by the name Jill Serval. Despite being injured, she continues to fight for her life, determined not to fall in a way that would satisfy the man pursuing her. At that moment, the man in question appears and, with a single attack, subdues Jill, telling her that her end will come tomorrow. Jill recalls that this man proposed to her the very night they first met at a ball. She remembers her adolescence, which was anything but ordinary. Due to her battlefield prowess, she became known as the daughter of the god of war, receiving countless love letters, more from women than men. She never thought about being called heartless because everything she did was for her first love, Gerald der Kratos. Or so she thought, until she discovered his true nature. Now, Gerald has captured Jill and tells her that he never would have imagined the woman destined to be his wife would be on the run, refusing to admit her crimes. Jill quickly defends herself, insisting that the accusations are false. However, Gerald mentions that his sister Ferris has been deeply distressed by all the commotion. Jill comments on how he's always been overly attentive to his sister, to which Gerald replies that indeed nothing in this world compares to her. Here, through Jill's thoughts, it becomes clear that Gerald is in love with his own sister. Gerald then grabs Jill by the hair and tells her that perhaps she would have lived longer if she had maintained her blind faith in him. He even cruelly suggests that he would have allowed her to raise the children he would have had with Ferris, though he couldn't stand the thought of any of them resembling her. After this, Gerald orders the guards to take her away, but Jill swiftly disarms them and attempts to attack him. However, Gerald easily blocks her attack and disarms her in return. Despite this, Jill manages to escape and flees to the top of the clock tower. Once there, addressing him as Your Highness, Jill declares that he didn't get rid of her. She's the one who will get rid of him, as she throws herself into the void. Gerald immediately orders the guards to throw spears at her, but Jill manages to deflect all of them except one. That final spear, surrounded by an unusual aura, almost seems to possess a will of its own. As Jill falls, she regrets the mistakes she's made, but she refuses to let this be her end. She doesn't want to leave the world believing that loving someone was a mistake. With her final breath, as the spear strikes her, she only asks for another chance, because if it were granted to her, she would never let anyone use her again for the rest of her life. Just then, as the clock strikes 12, time suddenly stops, giving an unexpected turn to events. Jill opens her eyes to hear someone calling her. It's her parents. This is impossible, as she had lost them long ago. Through their words, she quickly realizes that on this day, Prince Gerald turns 15. The strangeness of the situation hits her, as she should be 22 years old, leaving her confused about what's happening. When she is welcomed into the ballroom, Jill immediately recognizes the place. Seeing her reflection in the window, she's shocked to find she looks like the young girl she once was. When the youthful Prince Gerald arrives, she quickly makes an excuse to leave, saying she needs some air. This is part of her strategy. Whenever faced with a crisis, Jill runs until she can come up with a plan that works. She heads toward a door she knows leads to Ferris's room, Gerald's sister. Here, Jill reveals to us that her engagement to the prince had been nothing but a facade to hide the forbidden love between the two siblings. When Jill discovered the truth, Gerald annulled their engagement and, the next day, had her arrested on false charges, resulting in a death sentence. The charge? Attempting to poison the princess, a perfect excuse to silence her and protect the royal siblings. Jill's attempted escape leads us back to where the story began. Our young protagonist now finds herself on a balcony, reflecting on the situation. Although confused, she believes she knows how to avoid repeating her past mistakes. Just then, Gerald appears, once again with the same intent, to propose to her. However, this time Jill is faster, slipping away and returning to the ballroom. Now, Jill desperately tries to devise a new plan, claiming she has a boyfriend wouldn't work given her age. She needs someone untouchable by the prince. As she continues running, she briefly encounters a strange creature, which vanishes as quickly as it appears. Slowly, Gerald closes in on her. In a moment of desperation, Jill grabs the nearest man sitting nearby and boldly declares to the room that she's in love with him. Gerald is furious and the entire ballroom falls silent. To her surprise, the man eagerly accepts her declaration, but as Jill hears his voice, she realizes her grave mistake. For the sake of her survival, she couldn't have chosen worse. The man in question is Hadis Teos Rave, the future tyrant emperor who, in 6 years, will plunge the country into chaos. This is how Jill unwittingly proposes to the most dangerous man in the land. Jill later awakens, bewildered, in a guest room at the palace. Soon after, Rave enters, asking if she feels better. He kneels down and, with a calm demeanor, asks her to properly propose to him. Jill is baffled by his request, noting how vastly different he seems from the tyrant she knows he will become. In that moment, Jill experiences a flashback of her encounter with him in the future. She recalls how Rave ordered the massacre of everyone, including women and children, declaring that no family member was worth sparing. He had spoken coldly of making people suffer, and when Jill surrendered to halt the slaughter, Rave had no interest in honoring the surrender of a defeated soldier. Desperate, Jill offered herself as a prisoner, claiming that the daughter of the god of war would make a valuable war trophy. Rave, although reluctant, decided to withdraw his troops after accepting her offer. Back in the present, Jill compares the two versions of Rave, this gentle man now before her, and the ruthless tyrant from the future. The contrast is so stark, it feels as though she's looking at a completely different person. Almost tenderly, Rave helps her into a pair of small shoes, gently placing them on her feet to keep her warm. For the first time, Jill experiences what it feels like to be treated as if she were a fragile, innocent child. Despite all her battlefield experience, nothing could have prepared her for this. At that moment, Gerald bursts into the room demanding an explanation. A tense standoff follows, Rave, protective of his future wife, and Gerald, refusing to accept the engagement, insisting that Jill is promised to him as per their family's agreement. Rave remains unfazed. He picks up Jill and, with calm confidence, warns Gerald that challenging him would be unwise, as they are not on the same level. His imposing presence silences any further protest, and with ease he walks out of the room, effortlessly subduing the guards in his path. Rave apologizes to Jill for scaring her, and mentions that he highly doubts Prince Gerald will give up so easily. He then swiftly teleports them to a ship, planning to take her to his kingdom. He offers her new clothes, which makes Jill wonder why he had women's clothing on hand. 5 minutes later, Rave returns with tea and a delicious dessert. Jill enjoys the treat, thankful to be alive. Still, she asks the Emperor how seriously he's taking the engagement, especially considering her age. Without hesitation, Rave responds that she's perfect, sending a shiver down her spine. He also notes that her great magic power makes her his ideal match. At this, Jill realizes that Rave is a bit of a degenerate, falling for the whims of a little girl's joke and even willing to take her away. When Jill tells him it was all a joke, his expression shifts to a more serious one. He asks her if she truly wants to marry him, urging her to be clear if she doesn't. Unluckily for Rave, Jill confesses the truth. She explains that due to certain circumstances, she had to lie about the proposal. Just then, the dragon god, Rave, appears, mocking the situation and teasing the Emperor about how a girl could so easily propose to him. Jill recalls the legend of the goddess of love and earth, Kratos, and Rave, the god of logic and sky. For over 1,000 years, from myths to the founding of kingdoms, these deities had dragged humans into their eternal conflict. Kratos' kingdom had risen as a great magical nation, as most of its people were born with magical abilities. In contrast, in Rave's kingdom, magic was rare, but dragons were born in that land. As Rave and the dragon argue, Jill is stunned to learn that gods exist. The dragon thanks her for what happened the previous day. Since Jill can see and speak with him, the dragon states that she meets all the necessary conditions. Jill then asks Hadis, Rave, how old he is. He tells her he's 19, and notes that the age difference between him and Jill is normal. He further explains that his own mother, at 16, had married his father, who was 40. When Jill mentions wanting an heir, Hadis blushes, awkwardly remarking that it's inappropriate to discuss such matters when they barely know each other. He adds that everything has its order. First, they should talk, drink tea, and get to know each other better. Jill comments that Hadis's outward appearance and his inner self don't seem to match. She begins to realize that he's not what she expected, and moreover, that the entire marriage proposal was based on a lie. For this, Hadis apologizes, acknowledging that it was too convenient for a girl with such immense magic power to propose to him and fall in love so quickly. He promises that he will never forget her name or what she did for him, but now he intends to return her to Kratos. Hearing this, Jill is filled with dread, knowing that once she returns, only the incestuous worm Gerald will be waiting for her. Meanwhile, Hadis expresses his gratitude again, admitting that no one had ever declared they would dedicate their life to making him happy. That moment had been a dream for him. Jill, upon hearing this, can't believe what she's done, taking advantage of someone, just as others had done to her. Seeing the dragon wipe away Hadis's tears, she realizes he isn't a bad person after all. Moved by this, Jill takes back what she said earlier, and declares that she does want to marry him. Initially, Hadis is not pleased, thinking Jill is toying with his emotions, but Jill insists, explaining that she always keeps her word. Rave apologizes once again, and then Jill kneels before him, vowing that it will be her duty to make him happy for the rest of her life, no matter the cost. If you've reached this point in the video, don't forget to leave the word exquisito in the comments. Thank you very much, and see you in the next video.